Good afternoon. So we're here to talk about legal considerations for modular construction. And thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you today. We're a little bit squeezed on time, but we'll get through it. And I'll promise you one thing. I've been to enough of these conferences, and I've spoken at enough of these conferences. When you get pushed to the end of the day and it's 4:30, you guys have been here for 8 hours looking at things. I know there's one thing on your mind, and it's the lobby bar, not legal considerations for modular construction. So we'll get you out of here at 5 o'clock. So let me introduce myself. I'm Joe Young. I'm a partner with Smith Curry Olds. We are a nationwide construction law firm. We're one of the oldest, if not the oldest, construction law firm. We practice exclusively construction law and government contracts around the country. We're in Seattle, we're in California, DC, the Carolinas, Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. A little bit about my background. I'm a board-certified construction lawyer. I got my undergrad degree from University of Cincinnati. I'm sure there's some Cincinnati folks in the crowd. Actually, Greg Sizemore was one of my college professors, so it was an interesting opportunity to be invited to speak here today. Then I wanted to get out of the cold weather and do something else in the construction industry, so I went down to Miami to get my law degree from University of Miami. And I've practiced exclusively construction law since I started practicing. I represent all sides of the construction industry, from owners to trades to construction managers, sureties, design professionals, and any aspect of construction, whether it's from contract negotiation, contract drafting, to serving as project counsel, assisting just in general construction advice, and then I work on claims and litigation. And then I'm going to introduce my partner, Lachlan Samples.
Hey, good afternoon. I'll keep this short. So my background was in finance, went to law school, and I've done construction law for the last 15 years. I'm based out of Atlanta, and probably the most important thing is I'm a diehard Tennessee fan, so go Vols. My representation is mostly owners and general contractors, along with some specialty subcontractors, and we do the full gambit. And kind of what we've put together here, and Joe will jump into it, is just some of the legal risks we've been seeing. And frankly, none of this is new. It's just now being combined into the modular side. But the risks are the same risks that you have to account for on any project. So.
Thanks. And so and I apologize, we didn't have a little summary in the agenda, so you're wondering what am I going to talk about? Okay, as a construction lawyer, we don't just think of things as in strict what we call legalese, really technical stuff that you guys don't want to think about. What we do as construction lawyers is we apply practices, we apply the business of construction to the contract documents and how it applies and how you manage your risk. So what I want you to leave here today with is some practical understanding, not of how to specifically negotiate a deal, not how to specifically draft a contract provision, but how to identify some of the big picture risks and things so that you've got some walking knowledge. You know just enough to be dangerous. You know to ask the right questions. I mean, most of you are with sophisticated companies that have in-house counsel, but as project team members and project executives, it's really important to sort of understand where the risks lie and how we sort of deal with them. So we're going to go in a little bit about what modular construction is. We're going to talk about the different delivery systems that are applicable to modular construction. We're going to talk a little bit about licensing and permitting issues, inspection issues, because it's different than a traditional construction project where you're dealing with building inspectors going out and doing regular inspections. We're going to talk about warranties. We're going to talk about payment and performance risks and where the risk lies. And then we're going to talk briefly about insurance. So what is modular construction? I know you got a really good detailed primer in the last presentation, but the Modular Building Institute, they've got a pretty complicated definition. What do they say? They say it's a process in which a building is constructed off-site under controlled plant conditions using the same materials and designing to the same codes and standards as conventionally built facilities, but in half the time. The Institute goes on to say that they're produced in modules that when you put it together on site reflect the same design intent and specifications as any sophisticated project that is built on site. When I think of modular, I don't think about it in as complicated terms as the Institute has it. I think of it as just another level of prefabrication. Prefabrication has been a part of the construction industry for a very long time, right? What has evolved over time and why modular has become a sexy issue that people like to talk about is because it's grown in scope, it's grown in complexity, and it's become a bigger part of the project. So I mean, there's different types of modular. There's single trade, something like pre-engineered, prefabricated trusses, right? That's just one building component. Then there's modular, that's another prefabrication. You get multi-trades. You might have electrical, you might have plumbing that goes into a module. There's volumetric sub-assemblies, which that's something like you've got a module that's a bathroom. It's used a lot in hospitals, hotels, things that are very repeatable. It's a particular component of the building that goes in. And then modular has continued to expand and evolve to even bigger volumetric assemblies, including structures and huge levels of equipment. So really, whatever level you look at it, or whatever you're looking at for modular, it's really just another form of prefabrication. And so what are the benefits of it? So according to the Institute, it's greener, faster, and smarter, right? So greener because you've got greater flexibility and reuse. One of the big things is you've got less material waste. You're doing the construction off-site in a factory in what's more like an assembly line, okay? Not you've got materials stored all over the site. You've got trades running all over. So it's a lot more controlled environment. There's also studies out there that it improves the air quality, and I'm sure if you talk to different people, some people will agree with that and some people will disagree with it. The biggest thing I think in terms of modular is the speed of it. And in almost all construction cases in terms of construction risk, construction delays and timeliness are always ripe for disputes because owners want to get the project done as quickly as possible so that they can get the facility up and running, get revenue going. Contractors, typically they want to get the job done, they want to make their profit and move on to their next job. So the way that modular is designed is when you've got a typical or a standard or traditional construction project, you've got your design and engineering, and that's on the bottom here. You've got your permits and approvals, you start doing the site development, and then you do your building construction. And whenever you have a contract schedule or anything like that, when you look at the first schedule, it looks beautiful. It's all cascading tasks, right? I mean, ideally every project, every trade is going to follow each trade, and it's going to be a beautiful thing. But every trade relies on a prior trade to finish before they can proceed. And then when you look at a completed as-built schedule, it never looks like it cascades because things always happen. Things are always moved around. Trades are always moved to different parts of the building. Trades are resequenced, right? So the idea of modular is you take the building construction component that relies on the predecessor trades to complete, and you do it contemporaneously with building the site, the infrastructure, because you've only got so much room on a project site. You can only fit so many people. You can only do so many tasks. So many tasks are reliant on other tasks. So what you can do with modular is you take that building construction component and you're working on it in the plant at the same time that the site is being constructed. And for an owner, that results in, or if it's properly managed and properly planned, that should result in significant time savings. It's also a smarter and safer environment because you've got assembly line type processes in a manufacturing facility that are not subject to construction workers running all over the site, people trying to hurry around, people moving around, people transporting materials all around the site. So there's also limitless design opportunities, and I think that as modular continues to grow, you're going to see more types of systems are going to become modular. I mean, as design develops and people say, look, I can do this. I mean, I saw the other day a video of a 150-foot elevator as a modular component. I thought that was pretty cool, because that's typically something that it takes a while to do. A lot of trades are dependent on it, and it was easy. You trucked and craned it in, and so the designs are going to continue to evolve. Right here in town, just to show that modular is not this new system and it's been around forever. I mean, the Disney Contemporary Resort, that was a modular construction. That was completed back in 1971, where they had the rooms prefabricated as modular. And as you can see, this is the design of it. That's so what it looks like today. But this has been going on for a while. So the question is, how far can it go? I mean, it's being utilized a lot in hotels, things, and hospitals, things that have repeatable building systems. If you ever want to look up a really cool project, there's this mini sky city in China where they apparently completed it in 19 working days, 57 floors. There were over 2,700 modules. So I mean, they really had that dialed in to plan all that, plan all the deliveries, the prefabrication, the design, and that's a good example. So again, why do you use modular construction? Less waste, less material stored on site, less workers in confined areas. One of the big things that we see in construction projects, particularly when you get to finished trades, you get all these trades. The beginning of the project gets behind schedule. So what does the contractor do? The contractor takes the end trades and they stack them all together. We call that stacking of trades in the construction, or in the legal field. But what that does is it decreases productivity. It causes a bunch of conflicts. It causes a bunch of rework. It causes a bunch of damage to other trades' work. When you're dealing with it in a controlled manufacturer facility, it's a lot easier through an assembly line process than the way that traditional construction works. And it's oftentimes better quality when you have an assembly line of doing task by task, as opposed to people being moved all around a job site. And then there's a lower cost for the owner, not only on construction costs, but also in terms of improving the schedule, getting an accelerated schedule right off the bat that the contractor commits to, and getting the facility up and running and generating profit. So obviously, when you look at what modular is, there's certain things that you need to get in place. Obviously, the contractual terms, and you have to marry up sort of what your business plan is for implementing this model with the construction terms or the contract terms. And anyone can put together a contract that says, oh, look, this is for modular work. But really, you have to marry up what is the plan for executing this? Where do the design responsibilities start and stop for the modular subcontractor? Where do the warranties? Where does the risk of loss start and stop? Where does the ownership of these modules? When do you accept these things? These are all things that you sort of need to think about and plan, and then you work it into the contractual terms. And then Lachlan's going to talk about delivery systems and contracts.
Who's excited to talk about contracts at 4:30 on a Tuesday? So I want to preface this with, we're going to walk through a number of different types of contracts that are out there. There's AIA and ConsensusDocs being the two main ones. Those are great starting points. I personally like ConsensusDocs more. I think AIA favors architects a little bit too much. But we're going to walk through some of those contract provisions. Now, clearly, there's a huge difference between if you're prefabricating wooden trusses or if you're making a small modular nuclear reactor, right? And your contracts need to take those into account. So what we've done is identify a few of kind of the key points that we want to go through. Now, the first question you're going to have, I call it the risk-reward metric, right? How much risk do you want to have? And that's going to impact your contracting type. We've thrown up a few common types. I'm sure y'all are familiar with these. But obviously, design, bid, build, the owner's taking a lot more risk. They're responsible for design and coordination. And design, build, they're really handing off a lot of that risk to the contractor in exchange for a premium. There's no real difference in modular construction on these types of contracts that are going to come out. First choice is what are you going to select for your contracting method, and then how much risk are you willing to take and how much risk are you going to flow down. We see it a lot in similar issues in modular construction that you see with owner-provided equipment. I think that's a good parallel that's been going on for several years longer. So it gives us kind of a base of what to look at. So you heard this before, we're not going to beat a dead horse. The most important thing in modular is to bring in the fabricator early and put in what is called a design hold date or design freeze date. If you do not put in a design freeze date, you will probably be talking to somebody like me. I will give you an example. There were prefabricated trusses that were supposed to go on a large apartment complex in Los Angeles. The design kept changing and changing and changing. The subcontractor was a specialist in prefab. They were not a specialist in stick building. They ended up stick building, and we had a $25 million claim on that project. So it finished a year and a half late, and all of the benefits of modularization were lost because the design was never finished. Even when the project hit substantial completion, they were still making structural revisions to elements of the project. So obviously that's a worst case scenario, but it illustrates the issue of if you don't finalize your design, if you don't draw a hard stop to a notification of owner or whoever's responsible for the design finalization, if you exceed this date or you make changes after this date, there needs to be a disclosure that there's likely to be additional costs and or time impacts. That is by far the most important issue. The second one is define the design parameters. Nothing is worse than when you spend a lot of money building something offsite, it shows up and it doesn't fit, right? And you kind of laugh, it happens. And as part of those design parameters, you also want to determine what are your tolerances, right? Because there's going to be some fabrication tolerance that needs to be taken into account in the design, and then who's going to be responsible for matching those up. One thing that I know is popular that I personally dislike is this idea of design assist. That's a term y'all have heard. It's another one of those catch terms for wanting to talk to lawyers at the end of a project, because design assist conveys some nebulous duty on the fabricator to assist in the design and kind of quasi-certify that it can be built according to that design. But they don't carry E&O insurance. They're not the designer of record. It's just kind of a confusing item, but it pops up a lot in the modular area because they'll have the fabricator with this very loose design assist obligation, but they don't define what it is. And if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, take away that the more you define up front and the clearer you are on risk and who's bearing it, then the less chance you end up with a bad project. Obviously, there's a bunch of favorable contract terms to put in there. The biggest one, again, is the changes, and the second one is warranty. Because when you're building these modules, they come out, and presumably there's been some testing and inspection before they arrive. But you're not really going to know that they fit and work until you've got them in place and you're commissioning the building, you're starting it up, or whatever other startup activities you have. Well, what does that mean for warranty? Is warranty on delivery? Is warranty on acceptance? And we'll talk about acceptance a little bit later as well, and how acceptance plays in, when it's accepted, and who bears risks of loss. So we threw this in here just so you'll have a reference. AIA has one standardized form. It's between a CM and a modular contractor. ConsensusDocs, which Kurt had input in, for those who don't know, ConsensusDocs was created, it's an organization that was created to try to come up with more fair contracts for everybody. So contractors, owners, subs, everybody came together, trade organizations, and came up with a series of standardized documents. Again, these are a great starting point. But if you just print off one of the ConsensusDocs or AIA and say, sign this, your project is off to a poor start. So at least the ConsensusDoc has been around for a little bit. They're starting to develop some case law, and it follows what you would expect, which is the cases that seem to be going are where the parties do a poor job of defining who has what risk and who has what responsibility. If you're going, same thing with modular on the practical side of you need early buy-in. You need to focus early on getting the design finalized, coordinating your team members. The exact same thing applies to the contract. It's worth putting the time in to be clear as to who has what obligation. Unless the owner's willing just to say, GC, we'd like a design build, here's our performance specs, ready, set, go, and you get a nice 25, 30% premium for them taking that risk. One interesting aspect that has been coming up is the interchange between UCC and construction. So UCC stands for the Uniform Commercial Code. 49 out of 50 states have it. If you live in Louisiana, congratulations, you don't have to worry about this. The other 49 states adopted some variation of this code, and the idea was to facilitate the sale of goods and to establish standardized contracting terms and agreements between the parties, even if they didn't expressly agree to those amongst themselves. Now, it's interesting here because the question is a modular, or is a module that's been constructed, is it a good or is it a service? If it's a good, it's going to fall under the UCC. You got a different set of rules that apply. There's rights to cure, there's rights for strict performance. UCC can get very hairy very fast. If it's a service, the UCC doesn't apply, and you fall back to common law or whatever's in your contract. It's one of their interesting legal risks is choice of venue. Everybody likes dropping in their own choice of venue. How that plays out in modular can have unintended effects. You can have, I'll pick Tennessee because it's an easy one. You can have a Tennessee project and you have a modular construction that's done in Arizona and they do a choice of law provision in Arizona. Is it enforceable? Because Tennessee doesn't let you do that. So is it construction or is it UCC? If it's UCC, fine, you're going to be litigating in Arizona. Is it construction? You're probably in Tennessee. So just some interesting fallout from the UCC and its application. The guide we use is the more design services that are being provided or the more installation services that are being provided, the more it looks like construction and the less it looks like a good. And therefore the UCC would not apply. I think this is interesting from ConsensusDocs. They kind of saw this argument coming, and they're very careful in the words they use. It's not purchase order, it's subcontract. It's contractor, and they're trying to make it clear that this is construction, this is not just delivery of goods. So I think UCC does a nice job, or sorry, the ConsensusDocs does a nice job on that one. If anyone's had to deal with the fixture issue before when you're trying to close out jobs of what do fixtures qualify as, modular construction is very similar to me to fixtures. Once it's in, it's construction. Before that, it just depends on how much involvement there is. So again, these contracts that have come out, they're not perfect, they're good starts. Find somebody who has negotiated these before so that you don't find yourself missing some key terms. This is the test I was telling you about earlier. It's called the predominant purpose test. Again, what is the main purpose? This is what's going to decide which common law governs or whether the UCC governs. There's also some other nasty stuff in the UCC on acceptance of terms, and I can get very geeky on the legal side if you want to find me at the bar later. But in general, if you're retaining design services and installation services from a fabricator, from a module fabricator, it's going to be construction. If you are just buying a good and they have no further obligation, it's looking more like it's going to be the UCC. So here we've just dropped in a couple examples, some stuff that the contracts have tried to do to get around this issue. They put in a selection. The problem is about half the states don't care what you say in your selection because their law is going to, the law there is going to mandate whether common law or UCC apply. So it's great, congratulations, you made your selection, we don't care. We're gonna look at what actually went on.
All right, so in the modular context, I mean, any type of construction project, you're going to have to deal with licensing. You're going to have to deal with authorities having jurisdiction and permitting. And so the question is, okay, well, how is it different between a traditional construction project and a modular construction project? And the answer is that it really isn't. It's not really any different. Owners are going to always need to plan in advance and work with the authority having jurisdiction, because if you've got a project here in Florida, if you're buying modular units from California or Europe or wherever, you're still going to be typically bound by the same building code requirements, the same permit requirements as where the project is being constructed. So that's one of the important things to make sure that the modular manufacturer understands, is that as you start looking at bigger building components and putting together entire rooms, that entire room is going to have to comply with the local building department records. Same thing with, so there's a lot of these bigger projects, especially if you get into, if you get into industrial or things that have green energy type savings that are getting any sort of federal money. There's I want to mention the Build America, Buy America Act. So it used to just be for public procurements, but now if there's any sort of federal funding on a construction project, there's requirements to comply with the Build America, Buy America Act, and to have certain amounts of all of the components be American made. And that process becomes more complicated as you start manufacturing all these different building components and rooms and structures, either overseas or across the country. So in terms of the way that ConsensusDocs deals with it, basically all the licensing, whoever's working on it needs to have the same license as if they're working at the project site. So that's something from an owner or a contractor's perspective to make sure that they're complying with. Same thing, they do the same thing with permits and testing. And wherever this work is being constructed, at the end of the day, if it's going in a Florida project, it's going to need to comply with the Florida Building Code, okay? And what's kind of tricky and what you need to work with the authority having jurisdiction on is how to deal with inspections. And so at least in Florida, we've got a private provider process. Not a lot of jurisdictions around the country have really addressed modular. But what we know about construction projects is building departments always require sort of progress inspections, right? And you've got building inspectors typically walking all over your project all the time. So how do you deal with that when the project everything's being constructed either overseas or some other state? Are you able to, you have to get the authority having jurisdictions authorization to either use a private provider or send their building inspectors over there, because if you're constructing an entire room and putting it on a Florida project, the Florida, whatever jurisdiction you're in, they're going to want to make sure that thing is built per hurricane code, per building code, and meet all the requirements for a project in Florida. So that's something to just think through.
And Joe, just real quick on that one, that it lends itself to a lot of conflicts, right? So if you can stay even within the same state. If you're in different jurisdictions where your project site's at versus where you're prefabbing or constructing the modular items, what licensing rules and what code is going to apply? And you'd think it'd be easier. It's where the project's at, right? It's where it's ultimately going to end up. That's right about half the time. So you find yourself having to comply not just with your final location building code and licensing requirements, but you have to comply with the requirements in the place it's manufactured as well.
So that goes to my inspections and sign-offs. So you've got inspections by the building department. One of the important things about modular from an owner or a contractor standpoint, when you've got a modular fabricator or subcontractor, whatever you want to call it, is how do you deal with inspecting and accepting, okay? So when you think about a modular system, if you go build a bathroom in Texas and it gets shipped on a truck out to your project site in Florida, it's going to be in this module that's all wrapped up, right? So when it gets to the site, do you take a delivery sheet, just a bill of lading, and sign off on the bill of lading? Is that your acceptance? Well, you need to address that in the contracts, because as an owner or contractor, you have no idea what's inside that. I mean, you can verify that it showed up to the site, but you don't know if in that bathroom the plumbing's working. You don't know if in that bathroom the lights are working. You don't know if the toilet will flush. So in terms of the contracts, there needs to be, in any contract, a meaningful opportunity to inspect these things and not just sign off on a delivery. And one of the things that Lachlan mentioned about this dilemma between the UCC and the contracts, I mean, I always think it's better to put in your contracts clear delineation of how this is going to work, because the way the UCC views the world and the way it's drafted, it's not as complex as what you think about all these logistics, about all these different building components working. The UCC is more directed for like off the shelf type of goods that you buy and you accept right away. These are much more complex systems that you're taking on. So, I mean, the UCC has all these formulaic type things about when you accept it and when you have to reject it, when you have to send it back. And a lot of those are really not that practical in terms of dealing with a complex construction project. And so the ConsensusDocs does a much better job of trying to deal with it. They've got provisions in there that prevents the fabricator from shipping the components, because you can't just have a bunch of components show up to your job site and you've got no place to put them. So there are different controls in how to deal with that. And there's also opportunities to modify it to get real protocols in place to manage the quality and really understand if you're getting what you bought. Lachlan's going to talk about warranties.
We're closing in on 5, so I'm going to make this really fast.
Try to speed it up.
Define when your warranty starts, right? Don't leave it to, it starts at substantial completion. Define, is it when it arrives on site? Is it when it is commissioned? It is upon final completion of the project. Best thing you can, and that goes for everything that Joe and I are going to say, and any contract. Deal with the issues up front. Believe it or not, contract negotiations not all about gotcha provisions and who got the better of the other one. 9 times out of 10, it's about adding clarity so the parties know where they're accepting risk and know where they're buying or selling risk to somebody else. Nothing different at all with the warranties. Now, here's the odd thing. You're probably tired of hearing the words UCC. UCC reads in a bunch of additional warranties. These are implied warranties. They are generally non-waivable warranties. It's a warranty. It's called implied fitness for the intended purpose. Right? That means what you deliver will work. That is an automatic warranty that applies for the UCC, and in most states you cannot disclaim it. Merchantability, basically the same thing. It's dealing more with sales. And then obviously we've got the express warranties, which to me I think are probably the most applicable here. Once you pass a certain level of complexity in the modular construction, it is not going to fall into the UCC. It's just going to require too much coordination. The real questions are like, let's say you're doing a hotel room, right? Is that complicated enough to warrant it? Obviously, a data center is going to. A small modular reactor will hotel room. This is just the ConsensusDocs warranty. Y'all can read it on your own. We've highlighted kind of one of the important provisions because it does say how it shall be delivered and when the warranty starts. So you had heard us reference earlier a little bit about the Buy American Act, and I want to come back to that for one reason, and that's because you have component parts in modular construction, right? Duh. 51% have to be made in America or NAFTA to qualify for Buy American Act or Build American, Buy American. It changes regularly, so don't quote me on that. That could be something different next week, but 51% seems to be about it. But what does that mean? Is it cost? Is it volume? Is it weight? Heaven only knows. But it does play into how that structure gets deemed. I know it's primarily owners, but there's been a lot of GCs lately who've been halfway done with the job and realized, oops, it's a federal government contract. because the owner took a federal grant and didn't tell them until the job was halfway done. So the materials that are going in play in as well, because if you're doing a modular construction, and let's say you drop in a toilet, who is carrying that warranty? Just define it. When does that warranty start running? Is it one guy who is warranting the entire modular construction, or are they relying down on their vendors who are doing the installation as well? Oh. Payment risks. So one of the things with modular is A, they want to get paid up front, and B, most of them are not bondable. No performance bonds, no payment bonds. That's changing as you're getting some larger players moving in, but the vast majority of the modular contractors right now are not bondable or don't want to get a bond. They've got enough work that they're just saying, I'm not going to post a bond. If you don't like it, you can go wait 2 years with somebody else. So the financial risk is obviously they don't perform. So there are a number of ways to address that. The reality is right now it's become so popular and grown so fast that the modular contractors have most of the negotiation power, and they're going to give you more of a take it or leave it. They're not really going to agree to large withholdings of retainage, which can also get you in trouble in a number of states now, again, including Tennessee, where they've capped retainage, and it's actually a misdemeanor if you violate that. But milestone payments are popular, but again, they're just not, we're not seeing them a ton right now in the negotiations because the modular contractors have so much backlog, they don't have to. You pay up front, you'll get it when you get it. Performance risks, I think we heard some of these in the prior presentation. I thought they covered them very well, but just to highlight a few, these are things that when it goes wrong, it comes across on our desk. The first is missing schedule, and the second is it gets there and it doesn't fit. Or the design changes sufficiently that you're having to make major on-site modifications, in which case you've lost all of your schedule gain by taking this out of the project. Another one, and again, the permits and the inspections are going to be an issue because it's not clear which one, like what areas should apply, like I mentioned earlier. So nailing those down or doing the best you can. A lot of the trade organizations like AGC and ABC will reach out and get an opinion or give you an opinion if you ask them, and they've typically got pretty good sway in their various venues, at least in the Southeast. So that is a route to try to mitigate some of your risk, is to reach out and just ask, hey, we got a job, we're doing a modular construction, do we need to comply with local requirements at the factory, or is it just the final destination? Risk of loss. So one of the biggest things that we as attorneys try to do is mitigate or define risk. One of the big things with modular is you're creating maybe a sizable item that has to be delivered. It may just be across the street, it may be across the world. We heard earlier about stuff going through the Panama Canal. Who bears that risk of loss? This is the exact same risk of loss that you have for owner-provided equipment or ED-provided equipment. Just address it. Do you want responsibility to pass to the buyer upon shipping or upon delivery? It's really kind of as simple as that. That's the biggest loss item, and you would be surprised at how often that does not get defined, or there's competing terms on it because somebody issues a PO that says FOB buyer and the contract says FOB seller, and now you're in a great battle of the forms, which takes us back to my favorite topic of the UCC. It's not a place you want to be. Define it, make sure it's clear, and watch out, especially for smaller contractors when they send a purchase order back after signing a contract. Make sure it's in alignment with the contract that you have.
All right, so it's 5:02. I promised you we'd be done by 5, so I've already lost all my credibility, but I'm almost done. So, yeah, just a couple more things. I mean, we're about to wrap up. So in terms of risk management, we typically manage risk through 3 ways, okay? So one is sort of best business practices, pricing strategies, and planning, and all the business risks that you can control. A second way of managing risk is shifting that risk downstream. So obviously as the owner, you want to shift all your risk down to the contractor in terms of the schedules, in terms of whether it's liquidated damages, whether it's non-conformance by the subcontractors. You want to shift all that down through indemnities, through warranties, through your contract terms. The third way that you really manage risk on a construction project is you insure it. So you offload that risk not to the owner, not to the contractor, but off to the insurance companies. So in terms of thinking about modular for a construction project, this is something that owners need to work closely with their insurance brokers about, because you need to make sure in any construction project, and modular is no exception, you need to make sure there's no gaps, right? I mean, you've got various different types of insurance policies. You've got project-specific general liability policies. You've got builder's risk policies. You've got the different trades have their own policies. The rigging companies have policies. And all of these policies really need to work together so that you've got a comprehensive insurance strategy, right? And that's something that you need to rely on your broker to put together, because typically when you're doing on-site construction, you know that your project-specific general liability carrier is going to cover it. You know that or if it's a covered loss, you know that the builder's risk carrier may respond if there's something, an accident or something that's insurable happens on the project. Where it gets a little tricky is when you've got a bunch of construction being done at an off-site facility, okay? What insurance responds and when does it respond? When it's sitting on the project site in the parking lot, the module, whether it's installed in the building, whether it's hooked up and commissioned, that's something that is a very important risk, because the carrier should, that's why you pay a lot of money for insurance. Same thing with the use of cranes. I mean, a lot of crane companies will have pretty decent insurance policy limits, but a lot of times they don't have enough insurance for what they're actually holding. And when you're talking about modular construction, you're talking about very expensive components of the system. And that's one of the things why modular is so important, because as the modular idea gets bigger and more complex, you're dealing with a higher percentage of the project being modular, a higher risk on that modular subcontractor, and a lot more expensive equipment and portions of the project that need to be insured. So that's really all I have. There's some resources online that you can see in our presentation. It's on the app, or yeah, it's on the app. But takeaways are, I mean, as modular gets more important, it's so important to have a financially capable modular subcontractor that you trust, that has the financial ability, and it's so important to get the contract terms good and solid up front, identifying the different risk areas and really planning forward, because if your modular fabricator fails, your project fails, right? And so all of these schedule savings and all of these cost savings, if you don't have the right procedures in place, you don't have the contract set up the right way, all of that goes away, and you really haven't benefited yourself as the owner or the contractor at all. So I appreciate everyone's time today, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to, you can email Lachlan and I, or see us later. We'll be at the reception. Thank you.